spoken with you about just being so excited to see someone who looked like me in the field. And I was wondering what it was like for you when you saw your first female Asian sports reporter.
Yeah, sure thing. And growing up, like we're very few and far between in the industry, but I always saw like the Angela Sons of the industry, and that was great. I think being in Wisconsin, it's nice because Melissa Kim works out in Madison, so it's nice just being in a state where there's two Asian women in sports on TV. But you know, I just didn't see a lot of us, and that's kind of why I wanted to get into business because like you, I have a passion in sports, and so I'm like, why not? Just try to break some ground and break some glass ceilings and, get into this business and see how far I can get. And it's been nice having different role models, kind of Asian men and women kind of pave the way for us to get our feet in the door as well. And then, see how far we can get. But honestly, it's a small circle that we have with Asian women in sports on TV. It's a very select group. It's a great group. And I feel like, all the girls trying to get into the business, I mean, there's some great role models already in. So I think it's going to be a great group and excited for you to kind of break in as well.
Thank you. And sort of in that similar vein, I was wondering, like, how do you think like our unique sort of perspectives as these people that, we don't get to see people like us so often on TV? How do you think that perspective kind of shapes us as storytellers?
I do feel like your experiences and your background can kind of help you pave a story a certain way versus if you didn't have that cultural experience, that background that you do. I think and it gives you a bigger window into kind of what stories you're looking for. It's not a very narrow window, in my opinion. I do believe that because of the experiences we have, it kind of opens your eyes to different stories and to different athletes as well, just because we have, this background.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And so I wanted to, obviously, this whole segment and this whole thing that we're doing here is about your who, not your do. So I was wondering about, still in that similar vein, coronavirus has obviously thrown things askew for everyone. I've noticed particularly for me and for some other people that I know, it's been a little difficult, especially because of being Asian right now. There's obviously like a little bit rampant racism going on, and I was wondering how you've dealt with that.
You know what? I've been lucky that no one has said anything to me or no one's done anything to me. And I'm not going to be naive and say it's not going to happen. I do live in the Midwest, and, wherever you kind of are, there's a certain stigma, stereotype, whatnot, especially with Corona and all that, it's heightened. But luckily that hasn't been said to my face. No one's said anything via social media to me, but I'm always very aware that it could happen. And that's tough because, you don't want to speak out of character if someone's saying something derogatory or offensive to you, but you still want to stand up for yourself because you don't want to just lay down and be like, I'm just going to take it and not say anything. So I'm very kind of cautious to see, I'm very cautious in, I guess, my response if I do get that. But, I do feel like there was just a certain kind of, I'm trying to phrase this, there's a certain light on Asian American people in general in the United States during this time, and kind of, being somebody on TV, you don't want to shed a negative light on the Asian American community if you just kind of pop off and say whatever. But I do feel like it's a way for us to really bring light to certain issues and speak our mind, because again, we don't want to just be a doormat in this situation, and I would never. It's just, luckily I haven't had that opportunity yet for someone to really pop off, so that's good.
I feel that. So how about like with sexism in the sports world? And that's sort of like a double whammy, like you're dealing with racism and sexism at the same time. How do you deal with that?
You just kind of have to hold your ground. I mean, it's, again, a lot of women in sports have different journeys, and I was the, not typical, but the more normal route of, you start in a small market and you work your way up. That's just kind of been my career journey thus far. And being, I started in a very small market, my first job out of college, and then I worked my way up. But the higher you go up, the bigger the intensity. And what I mean is, I went from a market where you're just covering high school sports and college sports to a pro market. And that's kind of when you're like, okay, now it's kind of real. I'm not saying that wasn't real before, but now you're covering a professional team, and wherever you kind of end up, there are media people that have been there for decades, and they kind of expect a certain level of questions of professionalism, whatnot. But there are also those people that see, hey, you're number one, a female, but also an Asian female. What do you know about sports? And it's kind of your job to be like, I know my stuff. I'm going to hold my ground and you can't trample over me. There have been instances in the locker room where, especially for Packers, it's, everyone's very tightly fitted into a scrum for a certain player. It's just how it is in the NFL and other pro sports, and so there was another reporter who kind of shoved us into the locker because he was trying to get a better shot with his microphone. And I stepped aside and I was like, listen, that's not cool. And he said, welcome to an NFL locker room. In my mind, I was like, okay, I can't really say anything bad because I'm in a professional setting, but you have to be prepared for those guys who just look down on you. But in the same regard, get your question out, hold your ground, and just, you know your stuff. So that's just all that. It's going to shine whenever, you get to where you're going.
That's awesome. That's lovely. I'm excited to hear that too, to know that I have a shot out there.
Exactly.
So your job is to tell people's stories. It's our job. But how comfortable are you sharing your own?
Very comfortable. Did you want me to kind of talk about?
Yeah, tell me the catalyst. Like, how did that happen?
Sure. So I was kind of checking on social media. I'm like, what's Kylie about? And do you go to Miami or are you
Yeah,
from Miami?
I'm at University of Miami, and I'm from Miami, born and bred.
Okay, so I'm a Gator fan. So that's
I
funny.
saw that. I was a little questionable about that, but I'll let it slide.
So my parents went to UF and I was born in Gainesville. So that's kind of where my love for the Gators came from. And so everyone thinks I'm from Florida, but I'm from Indiana. But nonetheless, kind of Gator sports is what got me into my love of sports. Like my dad was a huge college football fan. I'm sure you're a huge college football fan. And so growing up watching on TV, I'm like, I don't see anybody like me on TV. So I'm like, why not try to do this? And, I kind of dabbled in some other venues in high school, just trying to see like what I would like. And then I eventually took a internship class in high school and then interned or job shadowed at a station in Indiana. And I was like, this is kind of where I want to go. So I kind of took that step in high school and then went to college for it. I went to a school in Boston, had a fantastic broadcast program and, interned with the different pro teams out there as well. And then kind of got my foot into the business in a small market. And again, everyone has different paths out of college. You can go to a regional network, you can do X, Y, Z. But for me, just the opportunity that presented itself, and it is tough, because we don't fit a certain stereotype of look. And that's kind of been, I was talking with my girlfriends about it. I'm like, it's a little bit different nowadays because if you have a certain look or you're a certain this or that, it's a little bit, I shouldn't say easier, but they're more prone to hire said look. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Versus someone who is very foreign to what they're normally hiring, like someone of color. So for me, it was more so of like, I can't compare my path to someone else's. I could see someone a little bit younger at this network or whatever, but you're kind of taking your own journey. And for me, it was small market, Green Bay, which really kind of helped me blossom as a reporter because I was covering a pro team, which is what I want to do. And then I got the job here in Milwaukee. So it's 3 pro teams versus 1, which is great. So
it's awesome. So in a similar vein, my last question for you. So I know your purpose for your job and you've told me about your career arc, but what is your purpose for you as a person outside of your job? Like, what's your who, not your do?
Oh, that's a great question. For me, it's just really trying to be fulfilled. And it's kind of the question of what will make me fulfilled. And for a long time, when I was younger, I was like, it's getting to a regional network, which is still my goal, and even a network, in the future. But I'm like, for me, it's kind of, what's going to make me fulfilled? And it's at the end of the day, it's just being happy with yourself, being happy with the work you're doing, being happy with where you are. And that's the biggest thing that I've had to kind of accept, again, is to not look at someone else's journey. It's to accept you are on your own unique path and you will get to where you're meant to be when the time is right. And for me now it's kind of really settling in, especially since we're working from home. So it's really, you kind of have to adapt to, all this stuff while kind of being alone, but still working. But for me, work for me right now is very fulfilling. So I'd say, it's not, I know we don't want to talk about work, but for me, work is a huge part of making me fulfilled, and it's been great so far. So
thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you again for coming on and doing this with me. Bye. It was great chatting with you.
bye. Lovely meeting you.